The Valeri Empire stretched across more than 100 star systems. Its cities floated in the skies of gas giants, and its palaces glittered under the light of 3 suns. Among all its noble families, none was more admired than the royal house. The emperor's daughter, Princess Leora, was known for her calm dignity, graceful voice, and thoughtful mind, but behind the titles and ceremonies, there was a truth whispered in the halls. Leora could not produce heirs. In Valeri culture, heirs were seen not only as personal joy, but also as a sign of strength for the bloodline. The news had brought her sympathy at first, but as years passed, pity turned into quiet exclusion. The royal council, always concerned about appearances, decided to remove her from the center of court life. They invented a diplomatic reason to pair her with someone from outside the empire. Officially, it was to strengthen bonds with other civilizations. Unofficially, it was a way to hide her from the political stage. The chosen partner was a human named Tomas, an engineer from a far-off planet called Earth. Leora had never met a human before. She had heard they were inventive, but unrefined, adaptable, but strange in their ways. The council arranged for the meeting to take place aboard the diplomatic vessel Radiance of Dawn. As it traveled between star systems, when Tomas stepped into the audience chamber, he did not bow in the exaggerated Valeri style. He gave a small, respectful nod. His clothes were practical, not ceremonial light brown fabric, a simple utility belt, and boots made for walking instead of display. His hair was dark and a little untidy, as if he had been more concerned with work than appearance. Leora studied him in silence. He was not what she expected. She thought he might seem nervous or overawed by the surroundings. But his eyes moved calmly from one detail to another, studying the room, the guards, even the faint hum of the energy lines under the floor. "Princess Leora," he said in a steady voice, "I am Tomas of Earth. I look forward to understanding your world." It was a polite statement, yet it felt different from the empty compliments she usually heard. She replied in the formal way required of her, "The Valeri Empire welcomes you. May your time here be harmonious." The meeting was short. Afterwards, Leora returned to her private quarters. She felt no anger toward Tomas, but neither did she feel hope. This arrangement was not her choice, and she doubted it would change her quiet exile from the life she once knew. The next day, the Radiance of Dawn docked at the capital station. Above the Valeri homeworld, Valora Prime, the city below shone like a sea of crystal, with tall spires linked by silver bridges. Tomas followed Leora through the docking bay, his gaze flicking to the giant airships gliding between towers. As they walked, one of the docking gates emitted a sharp alarm. Leora paused, and two Valeri engineers rushed past them toward a control panel. She overheard fragments of their hurried words. The main water regulators for the palace district were failing, and repairs could take days. Tomas tilted his head, listening. "Is the water supply at risk?" he asked one of the guards. The guard looked surprised. "Yes, but our engineers are already at work." His tone suggested the matter was closed. Yet Tomas stayed thoughtful as they continued toward the palace. The palace was unlike anything Tomas had seen before. Walls of pale crystal reflected sunlight into patterns on the floor. Gardens floated in platforms above courtyards, with waterfalls spilling into pools far below. Every detail was elegant, yet everything was made to impress visitors rather than to serve function. Leora led him through the halls with the calm pace of someone who had walked them all her life. When they reached the guest wing, she gave him a small bow. "You will be comfortable here," she said. "Your quarters have been prepared." Tomas nodded, but before entering, he asked, "May I see the water regulators? I heard they're having trouble." Leora raised her eyebrows. "That is a matter for our engineers." "Yes," Tomas agreed, "but sometimes a fresh set of eyes can help." Something in his voice was not boastful, it was simple confidence. Leora hesitated, then motioned for one of the palace attendants. "Take him to the lower maintenance halls," she ordered. Several hours later, Tomas returned to the guest wing, his hands marked with faint smudges of metallic dust. Leora met him in the corridor. "I heard you spent the afternoon in the maintenance sector," she said. "Yes," Tomas replied. The regulator's control relays were misaligned. They used a triple-phase loop, but one of the connectors had been installed slightly off-angle. The local team was looking for a software fault, but the real problem was mechanical. I adjusted it, and the flow is stable now. Leora blinked. It took you hours. It could have been done faster. Tomas said, but I had to convince the team to let me try. He gave a small shrug. They're good people, just unused to thinking in that direction. That evening, the palace water systems returned to full operation. Leora overheard two of the engineers discussing the human solution with unexpected respect. She found herself thinking about that moment. In the docking bay, the way Tomas had reacted immediately, not out of duty to the council, but out of concern for a practical problem. He had no political reason to help. He simply wanted to fix what was broken. In the days that followed, Tomas explored the city's lower districts with quiet curiosity, while the Valeri nobility preferred the polished upper bridges. Tomas seemed equally interested in the market, stalls beneath them, the workshops tucked into side streets, and the transport stations crowded with workers. When he spoke with people, his manner was neither overly formal nor carelessly familiar. He listened more than he talked, and when he did speak, it was often to ask simple, direct questions. Leora began to realize that his presence was different from anyone she had known. Still, she reminded herself this was only the beginning of an arrangement decided for political reasons. Their lives were bound by duty, not choice. She did not expect anything more, but deep inside, a quiet spark of curiosity had begun to stir, curiosity about the man from Earth who had arrived in her world with steady eyes and a mind that noticed things others ignored. And that small spark was something she had not felt in years. The Valeri Empire was not just a city of glass and metal. It stretched to distant colonies scattered across barren moons and wild planets. Many of these colonies struggled to survive, far from the protective rules and resources of the capital. Leora had visited some of these places before, always accompanied by nobles and guards. It was routine, ceremonial, and often tiresome. But Tomas insisted on joining her on her next inspection, saying he wanted to understand the Valeri world beyond the palace walls. At first, the attendants and guards were uneasy. Humans were not used to Valeri gravity or their floating transportation systems. They moved with awkward steps. But Tomas's curiosity and steady composure soon earned him cautious approval. Their first stop was the settlement of Korath, a colony on a rocky moon with a thin atmosphere. The colony struggled with failing water filtration systems and dying crops. The moment they landed, Leora noticed the worried faces of the residents. Dust covered their clothes, and their eyes carried exhaustion. The Valeri Council expected her to make a brief ceremonial visit, offer words of encouragement, and leave. But Tomas walked with her through the colony, examining the irrigation lines and storage tanks. He asked clear, simple questions about how the systems worked. They cannot pump enough water to the upper terraces, a technician explained, and the filters clog too quickly. The machinery is old, but replacement supplies will take months to arrive. Tomas crouched down and studied the pipes. The clogging is caused by a buildup in the bends, he said. If we add a small bypass loop and realign the flow, the filters will last much longer. I can show your team how to adjust it. Leora watched in silence. The human did not boast, did not demand recognition. He only focused on solving the problem. By the end of the day, the colonists were watering crops again. Tomas had left detailed sketches and instructions for the local engineers. One elderly woman approached Leora as she prepared to leave. Your guest, he cares for people, she said quietly. He listens. That is rare in visitors from the capital. Leora felt a small warmth inside. Tomas had changed something in the colony, but more than that. He had shown her how different humans could be: practical, kind, and determined to help without seeking reward. Back on the palace station, Leora reflected on the day. She had seen humans in stories and reports, but Tomas was different. He did not bow to tradition. He thought differently, acted quickly, and valued practical solutions over appearances. It made her question the rigid rules of her own society. Tomas, however, remained calm. He walked the palace halls, helping with small repairs in the guest wing and observing the energy systems. When Leora passed by, he smiled. "I enjoy seeing how your systems work," he said. "There is so much here that is well designed. It just needs attention in the right places. You make it sound simple." Leora replied. He shook his head. "It is not simple, but it is possible." For the first time in years, Leora felt a flicker of hope, not about her condition, not about politics, but about the possibility of seeing things differently. A few days later, news arrived of a minor incident in another colony on the edge of Valeri's space. A supply shuttle had crashed, and survivors were trapped under rubble. Most of the council only sent a message of sympathy, noting that help would arrive in a week. Tomas, however, spoke immediately. "We can help them now," he said. "We have the equipment on the capital station, and I can work with the Valeri engineers to coordinate transport." Leora hesitated. The council would disapprove. It was far outside protocol. Yet something inside her pushed her to follow. "Show me," she said. Within hours, they boarded a transport ship with a small team of Valeri engineers. Tomas instructed the crew on how to use the cranes and stabilizers efficiently. He treated the local engineers as equals, listening to their ideas while guiding the operation. The shuttle wreckage was cleared faster than anyone expected, and all the survivors were rescued. The colonists looked at Tomas with gratitude and respect. Leora noticed how the humans' simple actions inspired loyalty and trust. It was not about titles or ceremonies, it was about action. During the return trip to Valor Prime, Leora and Tomas had a quiet moment alone. The stars stretched endlessly outside the ship's viewing window. "You make humans seem capable of more than I expected," Leora said softly. Tomas looked at her. "We can be, but it is not just humans. It is anyone who chooses to act, who chooses to help rather than wait." Leora considered his words. She had spent years hiding from her own potential, thinking that her value was only in producing heirs or pleasing the council. Tomas did not care about her titles or her limitations. He cared about what could be done here and now. "Do you always fix everything?" she asked, half amused. "I try to," he said with a faint smile. "But sometimes I fail. The important part is trying." Leora found herself laughing quietly. It had been a long time since she felt light in spirit. The next morning, the palace summoned Tomas and Leora to a council meeting. Leora expected criticism. The council often complained about her spending time in colonies or engaging in actions outside protocol. But today, something unusual happened. The engineers from Korth and the shuttle rescue sent detailed reports praising Tomas's methods. They described how his approach saved crops, water systems, and lives. The council members were forced to acknowledge that the humans' presence had brought unexpected benefits. Leora noticed that some of the nobles looked uneasy. Tomas had achieved results without relying on their authority or position. It was a quiet kind of power different from theirs, but undeniable. After the meeting, Leora walked with Tomas through the palace gardens. Floating platforms glimmered in sunlight, and the gentle hum of waterfalls filled the air. "You see things differently," she said. "Your perspective, it makes me wonder about my own world." Tomas looked at the falling water. "Sometimes you need someone from outside to notice what is hidden. That can change everything." Leora nodded. In that moment, she realized the truth of his words. Perhaps she had been waiting for change all along, without knowing it. The day ended with a calm silence between them. Leora returned to her quarters with a strange sense of anticipation. Tomas was not just a companion imposed by the council. He was a person who saw value where others saw limitation. For the first time, Leora allowed herself to imagine possibilities beyond the strict rules of her society. The spark of hope that Tomas had ignited was not just about technical fixes or water systems. It was about life, courage, and the power to make choices. And in the quiet glow of the palace lights, Leora felt the faint but growing certainty that her life was about to change in ways she could never have expected. The Valeri Empire was vast, but even its power could not reach every corner at once. At the edges of their territory, colonies struggle with limited supplies, harsh environments, and occasional attacks from space pirates, reports of unrest. And shortages were often delayed, arriving weeks after the events had begun. Leora and Tomas were invited to inspect the colony on the planet Olaris, a world of red dust and jagged cliffs. The council expected the visit to be a simple show of presence, but Tomas had insisted on going immediately upon hearing that the colony's water purification system was failing again. Leora knew it was unusual for a visitor to challenge the timing of a council mission, but she agreed. The moment their ship entered Olaris' atmosphere, the landscape told its story. Cracked soil stretched for miles, and the air was thick with dust. The colony's buildings were small and sturdy, made to withstand dust storms and sudden temperature drops. Children ran barefoot through the streets, while adults carried heavy containers of water. Tomas's eyes moved constantly, noting details that others might ignore. The main reservoir is contaminated, one of the colony engineers explained. We tried filtering it, but the pumps break every few days. Tomas knelt beside the pipes, examining the fittings. The pressure valves are not aligned properly, he said. A small adjustment here and here will prevent backflow and reduce strain on the pumps. I can show your team. Leora watched him work with quiet amazement. Tomas did not speak harshly or criticize the colonists. Instead, he guided them carefully, pointing out small fixes that would make a big difference. Within hours, water flowed cleanly to the central storage tanks. Children and adults alike cheered quietly, relieved that they would have enough for their crops and daily needs. It was a small victory, but for Leora, it was significant. Tomas did not rely on the prestige of the Empire or orders from the Council. He relied on skill, observation, and a willingness to help. Leora realized that human ingenuity was different from Valeri tradition, and yet no less powerful. As they walked through the colony, an urgent message arrived from the orbital communications hub. A group of pirates had been sighted approaching a nearby mining station. The colony engineers warned that if the pirates attacked, both the station and the nearby trade route could be destroyed. The Valeri officials accompanying Leora argued that the matter was too dangerous and beyond their immediate concern. They wanted to wait for reinforcements from the capital. Tomas shook his head. Waiting will only make it worse. We can help them now. Leora hesitated. Acting without council approval was risky, but something in Tomas's voice left no room for doubt. Very well, she said. Show me how we help. They boarded a transport ship and raced toward the mining station. As they approached, Tomas studied the layout from the observation deck. The pirates will try to disable the shields first, he explained. If we can reroute the auxiliary power to the generators, the shields will hold long enough for the miners to evacuate. The main ship weapons are automated, but we can control the defense drones manually from here. Leora followed his instructions closely, relaying commands to the security team. The automated drones hummed and shifted as Tomas recalibrated their targeting systems. Small beams of energy shot into the sky, creating a barrier that blocked incoming pirate attacks. The miners, who had been trapped inside the station, moved quickly under Leora's guidance to safety zones. Within hours, the attack was neutralized. The pirates, surprised by the colony's resistance, retreated into the depths of space. The miners cheered, and Leora realized that Tomas had not only saved lives, but had also inspired courage in people who had felt powerless. That night, as the stars stretched endlessly outside their ship, Leora and Tomas sat in silence. The colony below was safe, the water was flowing, and the miners had returned to their stations. You see how humans act under pressure, Tomas said quietly. We adapt quickly because we rely on thinking, not tradition. We do what is needed, even if it is unexpected. Leora nodded. She had witnessed it herself, the calm determination, the focus on solving problems rather than seeking recognition. For years, she had believed that power was tied to rank, titles, and ceremony. Tomas showed her a different kind of strength, one built on action, courage, and cleverness. I have never met anyone like you, she admitted softly, Tomas smiled faintly. I have never met anyone like you either. You see more than most people do. Even if you do not realize it, the conversation remained quiet for a while. Each thinking about the day's events, Leora realized that her view of herself and her world was changing. Tomas's presence challenged her to think differently, to see the hidden potential in people and situations that others ignored. The next morning, they returned to Velora Prime. Leora was summoned to a council meeting to report on her visit to Alaris. She expected complaints about the unsanctioned actions at the mining station, but to her surprise, the council members were hesitant to criticize. Reports from the colony detailed Tomas's guidance and the successful defense of the mining station. The efficiency of his approach left the council with little room to object. Some nobles exchanged uneasy glances. A human, acting without their approval, had saved lives and maintained order. It was a quiet but undeniable power. Leora noticed that even the most critical council members avoided eye contact. When acknowledging the report after the meeting, Leora walked with Tomas through the floating gardens of the palace. The sunlight reflected off the water channels, casting dancing lights across the platforms. You see things differently, she said. Your way of thinking. It changes everything, even the way I view my own role. Tomas looked at the sparkling water. Sometimes you need someone outside your world to show you what is possible. That can change everything. Leora nodded. For the first time, she felt a growing sense of confidence. Her life, which had felt limited by expectation and custom, was opening to new possibilities. Later that evening, Leora stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the crystalline towers. She reflected on the colonies they had visited, the people they had helped, and the quiet heroism of a human who did not seek power or titles. For the first time in years, Leora felt hope not just for herself, but for her people. She realized that leadership was not only about position or birthright, it was about courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act when others hesitated. Tomas's example had planted a spark in her mind. She began to imagine a future where the Valeri Empire could embrace new ideas, where strength came from action and ingenuity rather than rank alone. And in the quiet of that evening, as the stars appeared one by one across the sky, Leora knew that this was only the beginning. The human beside her had shown her that change was possible, and that even the smallest acts of courage could transform lives. Her heart was lighter, her mind sharper, and her spirit awakened. The Empire would face challenges, and she would face them differently. With Tomas at her side, she could begin to see a world filled with potential. A world where humans and Valeri could work together, and a life where her own choices finally mattered. The Valeri Empire, for all its beauty and order, held secrets as well as power. In the quiet halls of the palace, Leora discovered that some truths were whispered in corners, never spoken openly. Tomas, ever curious, noticed her tension one morning as she walked with him through the gardens. Something troubles you, he said gently. Leora paused, staring at the floating platforms and cascading waterfalls. There are things in this palace that are not told, even to me, she admitted. The council, they made choices without explaining them. My life has been arranged in ways I did not choose, and now I am paired with you, not by chance, but by decision. Tomas looked at her carefully. They force you into a role. I can see that, but it does not define who you are or what you can do. She shook her head. It is more than role. It is a truth about me that they wish to hide. She lowered her voice. I cannot have children. That is why they chose you, to make it appear that I am useful in ways I never expected to be. Tomas did not react with pity. He only nodded, listening fully, without judgment. That is difficult, he said softly, but it may not be the end of what is possible. Have you asked if there is truly no solution? Leora looked at him in surprise. Do you think there is? I do not know. Tomas said, on my planet, medicine sometimes succeeds where other species have given up. Conditions thought impossible can be treated with new methods or technology. Leora laughed softly, almost bitterly. You speak as though humans can fix everything. I do not. Tomas replied. I only say that some things are possible if we look differently. If we act. Later that day, the palace received urgent communication. Reports came from a remote Valeri colony under threat of attack. Leora saw the distress on the council members' faces. As they debated what to do, the colony had recently discovered valuable resources, and unscrupulous groups sought to seize them. Waiting for reinforcements will cost lives, Tomas said. We can go now. We can help. Leora felt the familiar pull to act. She remembered how he had handled crises at Korth and Olaris. Then we leave immediately, she said. They boarded a transport ship and set course for the outer colony. During the flight, Leora asked Tomas about the possibility of her condition being treated. Human medicine is not magic, he explained, but there are ways to stimulate natural processes. Sometimes with devices or chemical treatments. It depends on the specifics. I would need to study your biology in detail, but there may be hope. Leora's heart quickened. She had not allowed herself to hope in years. Yet the words of a human from another world felt like light breaking through a long shadow. The outer colony, called Virel, was small and isolated. Tomas immediately assessed the situation. Food stores were limited, defense shields were unstable, and the water supply had minor contamination. While Valeri guards argued over protocol, Tomas moved quietly among the technicians. He adjusted energy flows, stabilized shields, and improved filtration systems. Leora observed him with admiration. Even in dangerous conditions, Tomas remained calm. His mind worked quickly, combining intelligence and action in ways she had never seen among the Valeri nobility. By evening, the colony was safe, the shields were strong, and the water was clean. The colonists approached Leora with gratitude, but her attention was on Tomas. You make it all seem possible, she said quietly. He smiled faintly. I only act when I can. Sometimes possibility is hidden by fear or hesitation. That night, Leora could not sleep. Her mind was full of questions. If humans could achieve so much through observation, reasoning, and courage, could they also help with what she thought impossible? Could her so-called barrenness be something that a different approach might change? The next morning, she returned to the palace laboratories with Tomas, there, under controlled observation. Tomas examined her condition carefully. Leora had never allowed anyone to look at her situation so directly. The Valeri Council would have forbidden it, but Tomas's human perspective did not judge. He asked questions, took measurements, and noted details that others had dismissed as irrelevant. It is unusual, he admitted. Not impossible. We may find a method to help. It will require patience, study, and cooperation. But there is hope. Leora felt a surge of emotion. Hope was something she had not experienced in years. And this hope came not from ceremony or titles, but from action, knowledge, and courage. As they worked, Leora realized another truth. Tomas's presence had changed her perception of her own value. She was no longer defined by what the council said she could or could not do. She saw herself as someone who could act, make choices, and influence outcomes. She was more than a princess or a political tool. She was a person with potential, guided by intelligence and courage. The council, unaware of Tomas's work in the laboratory, remained focused on politics and appearances. But Leora began to quietly assert herself. She asked questions, made suggestions, and implemented Tomas's methods discreetly. It was dangerous. If the council discovered that she was defying protocol, there could be severe consequences. Yet the growing spark within her would not be ignored. During one late-night discussion, Tomas spoke of the universe in a way that made Leora think differently. The galaxy is full of problems, he said, but strength does not always come from power or rank. It comes from thinking, observing, and acting. That is what humans rely on. That is what makes us capable. Leora realized he was not speaking only of humans. He was speaking of potential, of the ability to act even when systems and traditions seem rigid. She thought of the colonies they had saved, the lives improved, and the courage inspired. That same courage could be applied to her own life. I see it now, she said softly. Even someone limited by expectation can create change. Even me, Tomas. Nodded. Exactly. It is not about what you were told you cannot do. It is about what you choose to do. The turning point came unexpectedly. A hidden report arrived from the outer colonies. A rebellion was forming, groups in distant sectors, dissatisfied with neglect from the Central Empire, were beginning to unite. The council debated for hours, but Tomas and Leora understood that the rebellion could spread quickly. Unless action was taken, Leora realized that their work in the colonies had given them insight that the council ignored. She spoke with Tomas. Quietly, "We can act," she said. "We know what is happening. We can prepare, help, and prevent disaster. If we wait for the council's decision, it will be too late." Tomas smiled, calm as ever. "Then we act, together." For the first time, Leora embraced a role not imposed by others. She was no longer a passive princess, limited by expectation. She was a leader in action, supported by a human whose ingenuity, courage, and kindness had already transformed lives across the empire. That night, as they watched the stars from the palace balcony, Leora felt a sense of purpose. Tomas had opened a door, but it was she who chose to step through. The forbidden truth about her condition, the hidden weaknesses of the empire, and the challenges of the outer colonies were no longer barriers, they were opportunities. And she understood clearly that the future of her life, and perhaps the empire itself, would be shaped not by tradition or fear, but by action, courage, and the quiet brilliance of a human who had arrived to change everything. The Valeri Empire had always seemed untouchable to its citizens. Towers of crystal reached high into the sky, energy shields shimmered over the capital, and patrol ships glided silently through the orbit above. Yet now, a quiet fear had begun to spread. Rebellion in the outer rings had grown faster than the council expected. Reports indicated sabotage in supply lines, attacks on outlying settlements, and hints that enemy fleets were assembling in nearby star systems. Leora paced through the palace halls, Tomas following quietly. She had spent months learning from him, seeing the strength of human ingenuity and courage. Now, that knowledge would be tested against a threat closer than they had imagined. A sudden alarm rang through the palace. Lights flashed red, and a voice over the intercom announced, "Unauthorized entry detected in the outer perimeter. All personnel to stations." Leora's heart quickened. "It cannot be," she whispered. "The palace defenses are perfect." "They are strong," Tomas said calmly, "but nothing is perfect. We need to act quickly." The Valeri guards rushed to their stations, but confusion spread. The attackers were not ordinary pirates. They had advanced tactics, cloaking devices, and knowledge of the palace layout. Leora and Tomas were escorted to the control hub, where screens showed multiple breaches along the outer walls. "We are surrounded," one officer said nervously. "Shields are holding, but only barely. If they reach the central power grid." Tomas studied the displays, then pointed to the maintenance corridors that ran beneath the palace. "We can use these passages. I know the layout. We can move through them and reach critical systems before the attackers do." Leora nodded. Her voice was steady. "Take me with you. We will help." The maintenance corridors were narrow and dimly lit, but Tomas moved confidently. He guided the palace guards with precision, explaining how to reroute energy lines and block access points. Leora followed, observing his calm efficiency. Every decision was deliberate, every move calculated to protect lives while minimizing damage. At one junction, they encountered a group of attackers attempting to override a secondary shield generator. Leora's first instinct was fear, but Tomas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We can handle this," he said, using the system controls. Tomas activated a series of pressure valves in the corridor, harmless but blinding vapor-filled the space, forcing the attackers to retreat. The Valeri guards quickly surrounded them, securing the area. Leora realized that Tomas's approach combined technology and strategy in ways she had never seen. In her own people, they continued through the corridors, reaching the medical wing. There, Tomas discovered that several injured workers and children were trapped due to collapsed access points. "Help them first," Leora said firmly. We cannot let anyone be harmed while we fight. Tomas nodded. I will guide the drones to lift the debris. You coordinate the evacuations. Working together, they transformed the maintenance drones into rescue machines. Small mechanical arms carefully removed rubble, while lights guided the survivors to safety. Lior assisted with words of encouragement, calming frightened children. And worried adults stopped by the time the drones finished. All the trapped personnel had been saved. Lior felt a surge of pride not just in the work done, but in the courage of everyone around her. Their next challenge was the central power hub. The attackers had reached it and were attempting to shut down the energy grid. Without it, the palace shields would fail, leaving the capital exposed. Tomas studied the controls, his fingers moving swiftly over unfamiliar Valeri technology. The main systems are vulnerable to override, he said. We need to reroute auxiliary power. Through these channels, he pointed, and take manual control of the drones in the hub. That will buy us time. Lior relayed his instructions to the palace guards, who hesitated at first but soon followed his lead. The coordinated effort was tense. Each wrong move could disable the shields or allow attackers to enter the central core. But Tomas's clear guidance and human ingenuity kept everyone focused. Finally, the auxiliary power was rerouted, and the attackers were forced to retreat. The palace shields remained intact. Lior watched as the last group of intruders fled through the corridors, defeated not by brute force, but by strategy and teamwork. After the immediate threat was neutralized, Tomas and Lior checked the medical wing again. The children and workers had been moved to safety, and the injured were receiving care. Lior noticed a small group of technicians working quietly on restoring minor systems damaged during the breach. They are inspired, she said softly. By you? Tomas shook his head. It is not me. It is what anyone can do when they choose to act. Courage is contagious. Liora understood. She had witnessed it in the colonies, and now in the palace itself. Humans had a way of taking initiative that was simple yet powerful, and it inspired those around them to do the same. As calm returned to the palace, Liora and Tomas stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The towers reflected the setting sun, and the energy shields shimmered faintly against the darkening sky. The rebellion is growing, Liora said. They will not stop with this attack. We must prepare for what comes next. Tomas nodded. We will need a plan. The council may still delay, but we have knowledge and experience that can guide us. We must act before the next attack reaches the city fully. Liora felt the weight of responsibility, but also a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer passive. She had seen what human determination could accomplish, and she understood that leadership required more than following protocol. It required action, intelligence, and courage. I will not wait for approval, she said. We will act. Tomas smiled faintly. Good. That is how change begins. That night, as the palace lights reflected off the crystal towers, Liora reflected on the day's events. The attackers had been repelled, but the empire was not yet safe. She knew the rebellion would not stop. Yet she also knew that, with Tomas's guidance, human ingenuity, and her own determination, they could face what came next. The Valeri guards and palace staff had learned that day that courage and quick thinking could turn even a dire situation into a victory. Tomas had shown that sometimes the unexpected approach, the one outside tradition and hierarchy, could save lives where authority alone could not. Liora realized that she had grown stronger too. She was no longer merely the barren princess, defined by limitations. She was a leader who acted, inspired others, and faced danger with courage. She had discovered that true strength was not inherited or demanded. It was chosen and proven through action. As the stars stretched across the sky above the palace, Liora felt a quiet determination. The rebellion might rise again, but she would not stand aside. She had seen what humans could do, and she had learned from their courage. Together, they could face threats that seemed impossible. For the first time in her life, Liora understood that fear did not define her future. Action, intelligence, and courage did, and with Tomas by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The Valeri Empire had never faced a threat like this before. Rebellion in the Outer Rings had grown bold, and their forces had begun striking supply routes with increasing precision. The council debated endlessly over protocols and strategy, but Leora and Tomas knew that waiting would cost more lives. The pair stood in the control hub of the capital, studying star maps and communication logs. Tomas pointed to several star systems along the outer borders. "The rebels are gathering fleets here, here, and here," he said, tapping the screen. "If we can secure these systems and restore supply lines, we can stabilize the region and prevent further escalation." Leora nodded. "We will need to act quickly. Delay gives them the advantage." Tomas turned to her. "You have the authority here. You know the Empire better than anyone. I will advise, but the decisions are yours." Her pulse quickened. The responsibility felt heavy, but she also felt alive in a way she had never known. For the first time, her position as princess mattered not because of her title, but because of her choices. They organized a fleet of transport ships, patrol vessels, and repair drones. Leora took the lead in planning, consulting Tomas at every step. Unlike the Council's cautious approach, they focused on speed, intelligence, and practical solutions. Their first mission was to a mining colony under threat of sabotage. Leora divided the fleet into small squads, giving clear, achievable objectives to each. Tomas showed her how to use the drones not only for repairs, but also for reconnaissance. In minor defense, when they arrived, the situation was urgent: storage facilities were sabotaged, and minor fires threatened to spread. Leora directed the drones, while Tomas worked with the colony engineers to stabilize systems. In a matter of hours, the fires were contained, water systems restored, and critical machinery repaired. The colonists looked at Leora with newfound respect. She realized that her presence, guided by action and strategy rather than ceremony, inspired loyalty. Tomas had shown her the power of practical help, and now she was learning to lead in the same way. Next, they moved to intercept a rebel fleet attempting to cut off a supply corridor. The rebels were skilled, using cloaking devices to hide their movements. Tomas studied the fleet patterns, suggesting ways to predict their paths based on energy fluctuations. "Humans rely on observation and deduction," he explained. "We look for patterns others might miss. That can give us an advantage." Leora followed his plan. The Valeri ships, guided by her commands, blocked the rebels' escape routes while auxiliary drones disabled their engines without causing unnecessary damage. The rebels were forced to retreat, unable to complete their mission. The victory was small but critical. It prevented a supply shortage and boosted the morale of the outer colonies. Leora began to understand the value of combining human ingenuity with Valeri resources and discipline. As the fleet returned to the capital, Leora reflected on how much had changed. The princess who once walked the palace corridors quietly, constrained by expectations and limitations, now commanded fleets, made decisions, and inspired courage. Tomas had shown her that strength came not from status, but from action, intelligence, and determination. That night, in the observation deck of the flagship, Leora and Tomas spoke quietly. "The Council will not understand what we are doing," she said. "They still cling to rules and protocol. They will notice results," Tomas replied. "Action always speaks louder than words. You have changed things already, Leora. The colonies see it, and so will the Council soon." She looked at him, gratitude and admiration filling her chest. "I could not have done this without you." "You could," Tomas said. "I only showed you what was possible. The courage and intelligence were always yours. You just needed to trust yourself." Over the next weeks, Leora and Tomas coordinated multiple operations across the outer systems. They restored supply lines, repaired damaged colonies, and intercepted rebel attacks before they could escalate. The rebels began to lose confidence, unable to predict the rapid, decisive actions of Leora's forces. During one particularly dangerous mission, a rebel ship ambushed a transport convoy. The fleet faced heavy fire, and several Valeri ships were damaged. Tomas quickly analyzed the situation. We can use the asteroid field nearby, he said. They cannot maneuver as well as we can. Lead the convoy through, and we can turn the terrain to our advantage. Leora made the decision instantly. Do it. Guided by Tomas's calculations and her steady leadership, the convoy navigated the asteroid field, evading enemy fire. Rebel ships that followed were damaged against the asteroids, and the convoy emerged unscathed. Leora's confidence grew. She saw clearly that practical thinking, courage, and decisive action could overcome even well-prepared enemies. When they returned to Velora Prime, the council called a special meeting. For the first time, Leora addressed them not as a princess fulfilling ceremonial duties, but as a strategist and leader with authority earned through action. She presented the outcomes of the fleet operations, the restored colonies, and the intercepted rebel fleets. The council members were silent, some nodding in reluctant respect. Tomas stood beside her, calm and unobtrusive, but his presence reminded them that results came not from titles, but from ingenuity and courage. You have achieved results that none of us expected, one elder finally admitted. Perhaps we have underestimated the value of initiative and practical thinking. Leora felt a quiet satisfaction. Change had begun not through decree or ceremony, but through action, courage, and human ingenuity guiding Valeri resources. That evening, Leora walked through the palace gardens with Tomas. The floating platforms glimmered in the setting sun, and waterfalls sparkled in golden light. You have taught me something important, she said softly. That strength is not in birthright or expectation, but in action and courage. Tomas smiled. You already had that strength. I only showed you how to use it. For the first time in her life, Leora felt free from the limitations imposed on her. Her partnership with Tomas had transformed her understanding of herself, her people, and the possibilities for the Empire. Together, they had begun to turn the tide against rebellion, not with force alone, but with ingenuity, strategy, and care for the lives of others. As night fell over the capital, the stars reflected in the palace towers, Leora knew the Empire still faced challenges, but she also knew that with courage, intelligence, and determination, she could meet them. Human ingenuity had shown her a new path, and she would walk it with confidence. Ready to face whatever came next, the rebellion had tested the Empire, but it had also revealed the true power of leadership, action, courage, and the willingness to see beyond limits. And Leora was ready. The Valeri Empire faced its greatest challenge yet. Rebellion had grown bold, and a large fleet of rebel ships now approached Velora Prime. The council scrambled to respond, but panic was spreading. Citizens crowded the observation platforms, wondering if their shining city of crystal and light could withstand the attack. Leora stood at the command center, Tomas beside her. Every star system they had protected, every supply line restored, had led to this moment. But even now, the odds seemed overwhelming. They are larger than we expected, one officer reported. Shields may not hold if they attack simultaneously. Tomas leaned over the tactical map, studying the enemy fleet's movements. They are aggressive but predictable, he said. Their formations rely on force rather than strategy. We can outmaneuver them if we act quickly and decisively. Leora's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. Then we will act. This city, these people, our empire, they will not fall today. Prepare the fleet. I want every ship in position. As the Valeri fleet gathered, Leora coordinated with Tomas to create a new strategy. Unlike previous attacks, this one required innovation and precise execution. Tomas suggested splitting the fleet into fast, mobile units that could intercept the rebels while drones targeted the engines and weapons systems of the enemy ships. This is dangerous, Leora said, but it may be the only way to protect the city. Then we do it, Tomas said calmly. Courage is required, but careful action can win the day. Leora directed the fleet, giving clear, concise commands. The ships moved like a well-oiled mechanism, with each unit acting in coordination. For the first time, she felt the weight of leadership fully, but also the exhilaration of making a real difference. The battle began in the blackness of space. Energy beams streaked across the void, and the hum of shields filled the command center. Rebel ships advanced in waves, but Leora's fleet met them with precise maneuvers. Guided by Tomas's analysis and her commands, drones weaved through enemy formations, disabling engines and targeting weapons systems. The Valeri ships used terrain from nearby asteroid belts to gain advantage, forcing the enemy into positions where they could be easily contained. The battle was intense. Several rebel ships attempted to break through to the city, but Leora directed faster ships to intercept them. She communicated continuously with commanders, adjusting positions and strategies in real time. Tomas observed quietly, providing insight and solutions. Their formation is weakening, he noted. If we focus on the lead ships, the rest will scatter. Leora nodded. Target the lead ships. Concentrate fire and disable them without destroying them completely. The fleet obeyed, and the strategy worked. Rebel ships began retreating, confusion spreading through their ranks. Leora's combination of quick thinking, observation, and decisiveness turned the tide of battle. Amidst the chaos, a critical problem arose. One of the rebel commanders had managed to bypass the outer defenses and was heading toward the city's central power core. If it were destroyed, the entire city would be vulnerable. Leora's mind raced. I will go with a team and stop them, she said. Tomas shook his head gently. We go together. The faster we act, the better our chance of success. Strategy and courage are stronger together. They boarded a fast assault ship, leading a small squad through the battle. Tomas guided the team using both Valeri and human tactics, using shields, drones, and calculated maneuvers to outsmart the enemy. As they approached the central power core, the rebel commander deployed a small strike force. Leora stayed calm, giving clear orders to the squad. Tomas took control of auxiliary systems, disabling the enemy's weapons temporarily while Leora led the squad in a precise boarding maneuver. Within minutes, the rebel commander was captured, and the central core was secured. The city's shields remained fully operational, protecting the capital and its citizens. When the battle finally ended, the enemy fleet had been forced to retreat. The Valeri fleet returned victorious, but Leora knew the importance of vigilance. The rebellion had been checked, but the Empire would need constant care to prevent future threats. The Council held an emergency session to review the events. Leora presented her report, detailing the strategies, coordination, and innovative solutions that had saved the city. Tomas stood beside her, a calm presence among the formalities of the Council. You have demonstrated remarkable leadership. One elder said, your actions, combined with human ingenuity, have saved the Empire. Leora felt a surge of pride, not for herself alone, but for the cooperation, courage, and clever thinking that had protected countless lives. For the first time, she realized that leadership was not about titles or ceremonies. It was about action, intelligence, and the willingness to face challenges with determination. That evening, Leora walked with Tomas through the palace gardens. The city shimmered under a sky full of stars, reflecting in the waterfalls and crystal platforms. Today, we changed the course of history, she said softly. Tomas smiled. You did. I only guided, you acted. Leora thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a princess confined by expectation to a leader who could command fleets, save lives, and inspire courage. Tomas had shown her that strength could come from action, ingenuity, and kindness, not just rank or ceremony. Humans are remarkable, she said quietly. You have taught me more than I ever imagined, and you have learned quickly. Tomas replied, courage and intelligence are universal. They are not limited to one species. They walked in silence, watching the city sparkle. Leora felt a new sense of freedom and purpose. Her life had been transformed, not by decree, but by choice, action, and partnership. Over the next weeks, Leora and Tomas continued to strengthen the Empire. Supply lines were rebuilt, colonies were restored, and defenses were improved. The citizens began to see leadership as more than titles. They saw action, intelligence, and courage as true strength. Leora visited the outer colonies personally, leading repair efforts, advising local leaders, and inspiring hope, Tomas worked beside her, teaching practical solutions and innovative strategies. Together, they became a symbol of what could be achieved when humans and Valeri worked as equals. The Empire, once threatened by rebellion and disorder, began to thrive. Trust and leadership grew, and citizens felt empowered to act, innovate, and protect their communities. Finally, Lior stood on the balcony of the palace, looking out at the shining city. The stars reflected in her eyes, and she thought of everything that had changed. The barren princess, once defined by limitations, had become a leader of courage and vision. The human who had arrived as a companion had shown her the power of action, intelligence, and hope. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. Tomas nodded. "It is, and together, there is nothing we cannot face." The city glimmered under the night sky, a symbol of resilience, courage, and the remarkable power of partnership. Lior had learned that true strength was not inherited, but earned through action, clever thinking, and the willingness to protect and inspire others. The Valeri Empire had faced its greatest danger and emerged stronger, not because of tradition alone, but because a princess and a human had chosen to act, to lead, and to change the future. A new dawn had arrived, filled with possibility, hope, and the promise that courage, intelligence, and heart could transform lives and shape the destiny of an entire civilization. Lior smiled, knowing her life and her world would never be the same again.